Got a real busy week this week. We got to get our lineup set early. Let's talk some running backs here for week 12. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully, everybody's having a great Thanksgiving week out there. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's watching this. Hopefully, you have a great week. Hopefully, you eat a lot of food. Maybe do a little Black Friday shopping. Whatever it is, hopefully, you're having a great week. Today, we're going to be talking about running backs here for week 12, going through all the matchups, kind of giving you the same thing like we've been doing before, a brief analysis on each player in each game, so I can make sure that I touch somebody who is on your roster. Yes, I have a ticker going along the bottom with who my starts and sits of the week are, but I'm still going to touch on every single running back here in every matchup. Had a decent week last week. Out of the 6 that I had scrolling on the bottom, I got 4 out of the 6 correct. Alex Collins, I counted him as a miss. Gus Edwards, who? I mean, at least Alex Collins somewhat salvaged it with a touchdown, but it wasn't pretty. And then Marlon Mack, I'm going to put him as a miss also, only because he had a touchdown. He did have 16 carries, like 61 yards. Not a great game, salvaged it with a goal line touchdown. So I'm going to count that as a miss against myself. However, Kerryon Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, had them as starts of the week. They did great. Tevin Coleman and Jordan Howard, who I both had as sits of the week. Neither one of them did a whole lot, so that worked out great also. So let's try to get another good week here. I'll take 4 out of 6 any day, but we're going to talk about these the rest of these matchups here for week 12. Try to help you guys get set up here and get those lineups in early, since we have a few more Thursday games than we're used to. All right, Thanksgiving game number 1. We have the Bears at the Lions. For the Bears, we have Tariq Cohen and Jordan Howard. Now, these two teams just played each other in week 10, a couple weeks ago. Back in week 10, Tariq Cohen had 7 carries, 15 yards, and a touchdown to go along with another 6 receptions for 29. Jordan Howard was one of his inconsistent selves. He had 11 carries for 21 yards, 1 reception for 11. And now they get this same defense again, the Detroit Lions, who are giving up on average just over 25 points a game to opposing running backs. Back there in week 10, like I said, they allowed 20 points. This is definitely a team that you don't mind starting your offensive weapons against. However, once again, I am a lot higher on Tariq Cohen than I am Jordan Howard. It is worth noting that Mitch Trubisky is dealing with a shoulder injury. We need to watch that. It does sound like he wants to play and may be able to play on Thursday, but with it being a short week, monitor the practice reports, see what's coming out. If something happens where Mitch can't go, that would boost the value of Jordan Howard a little bit more. But as of right now, with Mitch Magic in the game, Tariq Cohen is the running back that I would rather start here. He's more consistent. And Jordan Howard, he may get the volume. He's been getting the volume lately. Last week, though, 18 carries, 63 yards. Now, that was against a tough Minnesota defense. Not taking that away from him. But he's yet to go over 100 yards yet on the season. Hasn't had a touchdown since week 9. He only has a total of 5 so far in the year, 2 of which all came in week 9 also. It's just inconsistent, and you worry about putting Jordan Howard in. You never know what you're going to get. Are you going to get the 11 for 21, or are you going to get the 14 for 47 and 2 touchdowns? It's just inefficient and inconsistent. I don't trust Jordan Howard this week. Tariq Cohen is the back that I want to play in Chicago here for week 12. On the other side, we have the Detroit Lions, and I hate this because Kerryon Johnson will not play. It did look like he suffered a major knee injury there during the game. However, lucked out. It's only a knee sprain. Will still miss a few weeks. With that being said, it's LeGarrette Blount and Theo Riddick time now in Detroit, but they're going up against the 3rd-ranked run defense in the Chicago Bears, who give up only on average 17 points a game. Like I said, that's ranked 3rd. They've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown on the ground to an opposing running back all season long. Thing about that was actually 2 weeks ago against the Detroit Lions, but that was also Kerryon Johnson, who will not be playing. LeGarrette Blount is not somebody who I'm looking to start this week. He's not somebody I'm going to rush out there and grab off waivers and start him against the Chicago Bears. In my opinion, Theo Riddick has a lot more value this week. It's the Bears. If Mitch Trubisky is playing, they can put up points and put up points in bunches. Detroit's going to have to throw the ball. Still unclear whether if Marvin Jones comes back. Now they're out Kerryon Johnson. They need weapons to put along Kenny Galladay. Theo Riddick is the next best option in that offense, in my opinion, and has the upside to have a great game here in Week 12. He is the guy that I would rather start in this backfield over LeGarrette Blount. In my opinion, Blount will be strictly touchdown goal line dependent, and if they can't get down there, he's going to disappoint you here in Week 12. Thanksgiving Day Game 2 will be the Redskins and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, for the Redskins, we got Adrian Peterson, who last week in the box score looked like he had a good game. However, he was highly inefficient again. Yes, he had 16 carries, 51 yards, and 2 touchdowns, which really made his numbers look great, but they were very touchdown dependent. And I have a feeling that's what it's going to be going forward for Adrian Peterson. Now there's no Alex Smith. And it's not like Alex Smith was out there lighting it up like Patrick Mahomes. I get it. But now they got Colt McCoy under center, the opposing defense of the Dallas Cowboys can really focus a little bit more on the run, and they're already the 9th-ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average 20 points per game. Only allowed 1 rushing touchdown to an opposing running back since week 4. Definitely an improved defense in Dallas. Adrian Peterson has offensive line injuries to worry about. The new quarterback under center in Colt McCoy. Limited weapons on the outside in the passing game because of injuries. The Washington Redskins offense could struggle, and if Dallas focuses on the run and takes Adrian Peterson away, they could force Colt McCoy to beat them, which I'm not too worried about if I'm Dallas. I'm not going to start Adrian Peterson this week. He's actually going to be one of my sits for the week in Week 12. For the Cowboys, we got Zeke Elliott, and I'm not going to sit here and sell you on Zeke Elliott, but it's about time. What I saw in the preseason is finally starting to come to fruition in Dallas. They're really involving Zeke in the passing game a lot more lately, and it's really, really elevating his value. Last game against the Atlanta Falcons, he had 7 catches for 79 yards. The week before that, 6 catches for 36 and a touchdown. They're really starting to involve him, and you're really starting to see big numbers out of Zeke. He's scored over 30 fantasy points in PPR leagues the past 2 weeks. He's definitely somebody who's climbed up the ranks. Some people were irritated with Zeke Elliott, saying, man, he wasn't worth my top pick. He's still running back 8 with a decent schedule to go, and now they're utilizing the way that I expected them to in the preseason. I wouldn't be surprised if Zeke carries you to not only the fantasy playoffs, but maybe even a fantasy championship if he's on your roster. Last game on Thanksgiving is going to be the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints. And for the Falcons, we have Tevin Coleman. He was one of my sits of the week last week, and I'm really not on the Tevin Coleman bandwagon again this week. Now he gets the New Orleans Saints, and that defense has been playing lights out as of late. They're the 4th-ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average 18 points a game. Ito Smith is still involved. He hasn't been efficient, and he's not really going to take the job from Tevin Coleman, but I can see them relying a lot more in the passing game, trying to beat the Saints and keep up with the Saints. They can score points in bunches. I don't care who they're playing, the New Orleans Saints can. Atlanta's going to have to throw the ball to stay involved. Now, a lot of people out there are going to say, well, that's good because Tevin Coleman is kind of their pass-catching back, which he is, but he's not really doing anything there either. The last 2 games he's combined for 6 catches and just over 40 yards. It's not that impressive. He's not being that efficient in the passing game either, where we thought he'd have a lot more value. He's somebody that I'm not overly excited to start this week, especially against the Saints. Ito Smith is in the same role. I mean, he's highly inefficient. Hopefully you're not in the position where you have to start him. He does have a little bit more value in PPR leagues, averaging right around 6 points a game here the past couple weeks. But neither one of these guys are overly productive. It's going to be more of the Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu type day, maybe even Austin Hooper. I'm not too high on Tevin Coleman this week. On the Saints side of the football, you got Kamara and Ingram. Kamara is a must-start every single week. He's still the number 2 fantasy running back in PPR leagues. But now, all of a sudden, the re-emergence of Mark Ingram is back, and it's almost to the point where he's a must-start every single week again. He's now had 2 straight weeks over 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns over those 2 games, and is averaging 23 fantasy points a game over these past 2 games. It's definitely kind of what we saw last year. They're finally starting to get back into that groove of being really super efficient with Kamara and Ingram. It's not like Ingram's going out there and touching the ball 25 times a game, but he's also, somewhat involved in the passing game. Not so much last week. Didn't have any receptions against Philadelphia. Didn't really need to. But the game before that against Cincinnati had 3 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown. He's somebody who has that added value. They have an absolutely amazing matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, who give up on average almost 32 points a game to opposing running backs. That's good enough for almost dead last in the league. They've allowed a rushing touchdown 4 straight weeks. Definitely a team you want to start your running backs against. Love Alvin Kamara like usual, but Mark Ingram is borderline must start every single week now. Browns and Bengals now on to Sunday. And we're talking about the Browns and Nick all about that Chubb life and Duke Johnson. Love Nick Chubb this week. Definitely going to be one of my starts of the week. Coming off the bye week, he's a little bit rested. He's one of only the few running backs in the NFL that average over 20 carries per game over his past, 4 games or so. Definitely somebody you want to have in your lineup. The game before the bye week, 20 carries, 176 yards and a touchdown. He's now had touchdowns in 2 straight games, going up against the 30th ranked run defense to opposing running backs in the Cincinnati Bengals, giving up on average just over 30 points per game. They have allowed 8 rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs over their last 5 games. This is definitely a game where you want to start the Browns running backs. Really like Nick Chubb this week, one of my starts of the week. Now for Duke Johnson, he's somebody else who has huge value. Ever since the change in the coaching staff, Duke Johnson has been relevant again. No, he's not going to get touches out of the backfield, but he is going to get work in the passing game. The last 2 games that he's played, 9 receptions, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs, 4 receptions, 31 yards, and a touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons. Now he gets the Cincinnati Bengals, which I expect him to be involved again. Both of these guys are great plays for Week 12. For the Bengals, we got Joe Mixon, and I haven't really been a fan of Joe Mixon the last 2 games. I actually kind of suggested to sit him for those 2 weeks, and a lot of people thought I was crazy. He salvaged his fantasy day last week with a touchdown, but only had 12 carries for 14 yards. 2 very tough matchups back-to-back where he had the Saints and the Ravens. Now he gets the Browns, who are the 26th ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average over 28 points a game. They've given up a slew of touchdowns to opposing running backs. In fact, they've given up, I almost have to count them up here, 4, 6, 8 rushing touchdowns in the last 5 games. This could be a game where these running backs just absolutely run all over each other. I like Joe Mixon a lot this week. He would definitely be somebody that I have in my lineup. Much better matchup than we've seen for Joe Mixon here the last 2 weeks. 49ers and Buccaneers are next, and for the 49ers, you got Matt Breida. And Matt Breida couldn't have had a bye week at a better time. He was dealing with all kinds of injuries, small minor injuries. Hopefully the bye week has allowed him to rest up a little bit, because when he's healthy and when he's in the game, he is very, very effective for the San Francisco 49ers. Right now, he's currently running back 19 in PPR leagues, and that's after dealing with all these injuries where he really struggled weeks 7, 8, and 9. Right there, the game before the bye week, 17 carries, 101 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Added in another 3 receptions for 31 yards and a touchdown through the air. And now they get the Tampa Bay defense, which is ranked 27th against opposing running backs, giving up on average 28 points per game. They gave up 2 rushing touchdowns last week to Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants. They've given up a total of 7 touchdowns over their last 4 games to opposing running backs. Great matchup for Matt Breida. Looks like he's going to have a chance to get a little bit healthier here since from the bye week. Like Matt Breida a lot this week, and he's definitely somebody that I would have in my lineup week 12. For the Bucs, we have Peyton Barber, and he's coming off his best game of the season, where he had 18 carries for 106 yards and a touchdown on the ground. By far his best production all year long. But it's Peyton Barber, and it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are now going back to Jameis Winston again as their quarterback. And I really don't like the upside. I don't like having to start Peyton Barber. Now, there are a couple bye weeks. Maybe you had Gurley or Hunt, and they're on bye this week, and you have no other options. It's not a bad start. He's going up against the 17th ranked run defense of the San Francisco 49ers, giving up on average 23 points per game to opposing running backs. There really isn't a whole lot of other options to take carries away from Peyton Barber. This could be a game that could be a little bit closer due to some of the turnovers that we're going to see from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They just love to throw interceptions there. Peyton Barber is a low-end, extremely low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3 this week. Not somebody who I'm excited to start. Only would be somebody that I would start if I had no other choice. Jags and Bills are next, and for the Jags, you have Leonard Fournette, who has kind of returned to Leonard Fournette form. Not going to be overly efficient, but is going to get a ton of volume. Had 28 carries, 95 yards, and a touchdown last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's now 2 straight weeks with a touchdown. 2 straight weeks over 24 carries on the ground. I expect more of the same this week on the road in Buffalo. It isn't a horrible defense in Buffalo. Their run defense isn't quite as strong as their passing defense. They have given up 5 rushing touchdowns over their last 4 games, giving up on average right around 24 points per game. Leonard Fournette is going to be another solid start, being on the road in Buffalo. The Buffalo defense is way better than the Buffalo offense. That's the best I can say for Buffalo. I like Leonard Fournette. I don't know if he has a crazy high ceiling this week, but is a safe play in my opinion. And on the other side, you have LaShawn McCoy, who's coming off his best game 2 weeks ago before the bye when he went up against the New York Jets, had 26 carries, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Best game of the year so far for Shady. But can it continue? Coming out of the bye week now against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are the number 2 ranked team against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 17 points a game, haven't allowed a rushing touchdown on the ground in the last 3 games that they've played, and they've played some decent running backs. They've gone up against Pittsburgh and James Conner, the Colts and Marlon Mack. Week 8, they had the Philadelphia Eagles and their trio of running backs, none of who are amazing by any means, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are still a solid run defense. They pretty much shut down James Conner for the most part last week on the ground. I expect more of the same this week. I'm not overly high on starting LaShawn McCoy. I get that there's not a whole lot of options. Hopefully you have 2 other solid running backs that you can put ahead of him, and then he could be a solid flex play. But trying to put him in as your solid RB2 and feeling good about it, I can't say that this week. Raiders and Ravens are next, and for the Raiders, you have Doug Martin and Jalen Richard. And now they get the Baltimore Ravens, who are the number 1 ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average only 16 points a game. They have given up a rushing touchdown 3 out of their last 4 contests. So there is that plus. They've only given up over 100 yards rushing to running backs 3 games so far this season, and they basically shut down Joe Mixon last week. Now, Doug Martin has never been somebody who's going to be overly productive this year for the Raiders anyway. Last week, against an Arizona Cardinals run defense, which he should have had a good game against, 10 carries for 52 yards. Nothing too spectacular. Jalen Richard had another PPR-style game. He did come in with 11 carries, 61 yards, slightly more efficient than Doug Martin, added in another 3 receptions for 32. Now, Martin's dealing with a minor ankle injury. How much that limits him, we don't know yet. In my opinion, Jalen Richard is the better play here, but I'm not overly high on starting either one of these guys. The matchup is just too tough in Baltimore. There'll be a lot of running on both sides of the ball. Not a whole lot of offensive weapons for either team as far as throwing it. Lamar Jackson under center really limits the upside of that offense because he's going to run the ball so many times himself. That just limits the total snaps and offensive plays that both teams are going to get because the clock is constantly running. I'm not a huge fan of either Oakland running back, but if I had to take my chances on one of them, it would be Jalen Richard over Doug Martin. For the Ravens, the sign still remains. Gus Edwards? Is he the guy now in Baltimore? It seems like it could be. Alex Collins came out, had that touchdown in the beginning of the game, and was looking okay, wasn't overly spectacular, and then basically gets benched for Gus Edwards, who just came off the practice squad, an undrafted, rookie out of Rutgers. I mean, what? Where did Gus Edwards come from? He played at the U. He's had production in college. Hadn't really done anything so far this year. And then last week comes out for 17 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown. As long as Lamar Jackson is under center, Gus Edwards has value. He's more of that run-pass option style. He can really complement Lamar Jackson well. If Lamar Jackson does come out and Joe Flacco returns, then it kind of returns to Alex Collins having more value. With that being said, I really don't want any of these guys right now. I don't know what to trust in this backfield. Is it going to be Edwards? Is it going to be Collins? Maybe this is the week that Ty Montgomery gets value. Who knows? It's a total crapshoot, and until it really solidifies itself with who stays under center, who the top running back will be, I'm not going to really look forward to playing any of these guys this week or for the foreseeable future, which really is horrible because they got some great games coming up that these guys could have some great value. So pay attention to it. Hopefully they can solidify that top running back, and whoever that is will have value at the end of the season just due to how easy their strength of schedule is going to be. Seahawks and Panthers are next, and for the Seahawks we have Chris Carson, somebody who is going to have value as long as he's healthy. They run the ball a lot, and they've been really successful in Seattle with it. Last week, 17 carries, 83 yards, and a touchdown against Green Bay. He does have a slightly tougher matchup this week against the 7th-ranked run defense to opposing running backs and the Carolina Panthers. giving up on average only 19 points per game, but they have allowed rushing touchdowns in 3 out of their last 4 games to opposing running backs. So there is upside for Chris Carson. We know he's going to get the bulk of the work. We know he's going to get the goal line work. That gives him value on a weekly basis. More of a mid to low end running back 2 as a safe floor every single week. And I do like Chris Carson again this week against the Carolina Panthers. For the Panthers, you have Christian McCaffrey, and right now he's currently the 7th ranked running back in PPR leagues. Definitely somebody who you're going to start on a weekly basis. He's got a middle-of-the-road matchup. The Seattle Seahawks are ranked 16th, so right there, right in the middle as far as run defense against opposing running backs goes, giving up on average right around 23 points a game. They've given up rushing touchdowns 3 straight weeks. Doesn't really matter, though. If you have Christian McCaffrey, he's almost a must-start every single week. Patriots and Jets are next, and we have for the Patriots, Sony Michel and James White. Now, Sony Michel is going to be one of my starts for the week, which may sound kind of strange. He missed a few games with a knee injury, came back against the Tennessee Titans the game before the bye week, only had 11 carries for 31 yards, no touchdowns. Well, he's had that bye week. He's had that extra week of practice to get back into the game flow, get back into game shape, game speed, after missing a few weeks there with that knee injury. He's definitely going to be somebody that the Patriots count on down the stretch, and this is a great matchup going up against a New York Jets team that just gave up that big day to Shady McCoy that we talked about a little bit earlier, where they gave up 2 touchdowns. They have given up 5 rushing touchdowns in their 4 last games. This is definitely an offense in New England. I expect to turn things around again. Every year it happens, right? New England makes a run second half of the year, going into the playoffs. They go in strong. It just happens. With Brady and Belichick there, especially now coming out of the bye week, kind of resetting the offense, sounds like Gronk is coming back. I expect that offense to take a step forward. Really like Sony Michel this week. I think he's got the potential for maybe 1, if not 2 touchdowns if they can get him down there around the goal line. And now James White is somebody who's going to have value every single week. He's always going to be involved in the game plan. More valuable in PPR leagues. He still is the number 9 ranked running back in PPR leagues. I like both these guys this week. Just be on the lookout, though. Rex Burkhead is lurking in the shadows of somebody who could come back here in the coming weeks. If that happens, I wouldn't put it past Belichick to kind of throw him in the mix here and there, which would limit some of the upside of Michel and White going forward. But as far as Week 12 goes, I like both these guys. For the Jets, we have Isaiah Crowell and Elijah McGuire, neither of who I'm too excited to start this week. For Isaiah Crowell, the guy hasn't rushed for more than 49 yards in a game since Week 5. And Week 5 is that game where he had the huge 200-yard day. Only 1 touchdown over those past 5 weeks. Hasn't been overly productive, hasn't been overly efficient. Now they get the 15th ranked run defense of the New England Patriots. They are going to be at home in New York, which is a plus. The Patriots did allow 2 rushing touchdowns their last game before the bye week to the Tennessee Titans. They have allowed over 100 yards to opposing running backs the last 2 straight games they've played. But I'm not too thrilled to start Isaiah Crowell. I would actually rather start Elijah McGuire in this offense, somebody who's more involved in the passing game than Isaiah Crowell, not overly involved, but he does have a little bit more upside, and I can see the Jets falling behind in this game and having to throw to stay in it. If that's the case, I see more work going Elijah McGuire's way, and Isaiah Crowell just becoming goal line touchdown dependent. If it was up to me, I'd only rather start Elijah McGuire. Crowell's inconsistencies and inefficiencies are just too hard for me to trust at this stage of the fantasy season. We're getting too close to fantasy playoff time. I don't want to risk it with Crowell. Giants and Eagles are next, and the Giants, Saquon Barkley, I'm not going to sell you on him. Dude had another huge game last week, 27 carries, 142 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He's a great play every single week. Going to get you 20-plus touches, regardless of the matchup, even though the Philadelphia Eagles are only allowing 22 points a game, currently ranked 12th in the NFL against opposing running backs. The last 2 weeks, they've given up over 300 yards rushing to opposing running backs. It's going to be another great game. Love some Saquon Barkley in Week 12. For the Eagles, I'm only going to talk about Josh Adams now because really, he's the only one worth a crap in Philadelphia that's actually producing anything. He just needs more volume. Last week, only 7 carries, but produced another 53 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, only 7 carries again, but had 47 yards. The guy is the best running back on the roster. Definitely somebody who needs to be involved more on a weekly basis. Now he gets a decent matchup against the New York Giants, who have given up on average 26 points a game to opposing running backs. They've given up a rushing touchdown in 5 straight games. They've given up over 100 yards the last 3 of them. Definitely a great matchup for Josh Adams. Really hoping that he sees more volume going forward, because if we could get this kid somewhere in the 12 to 18 touch range, He could be a solid running back 2 on somebody's roster. He just needs the opportunity. There's a chance he gets it this week, and I like Josh Adams here in week 12. Cardinals and Chargers are next, and for the Cardinals, you have David Johnson, whose owners are finally starting to be a little bit happier, possibly the past few weeks, ever since the changing in offensive coordinator. David Johnson is actually getting the touches. He's getting the volume that he's needed to get all year long. Over 20 carries, 2 straight games. Last week against the Raiders, 25 carries for 137 yards. Very productive on the ground. Didn't have the touchdown, but is definitely a start every single week going forward. Even though you've been disappointed this year with David Johnson, he still is the number 10 ranked running back in all of fantasy football and PPR leagues and has huge value down the stretch. Going up against the 19th ranked run defense of the Los Angeles Chargers, giving up on average 24 points a game, including last week they gave up 3 rushing touchdowns and over 100 yards to the Denver Broncos. Definitely a great start for David Johnson. For the Chargers, you have Melvin Gordon, and you're going to start Melvin Gordon against anybody he plays because why? He's the number 5 ranked running back in all of fantasy football, averaging over 22 points a game. He hasn't had a rushing touchdown the last 2 weeks. I expect that to change this week. I'm looking for a big game for Melvin Gordon. Dolphins and Colts are next, and for the Dolphins, you have Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake, who's already popped up on the injury report, wearing one of those non-contact jerseys in practice, which means he's still dealing with that shoulder injury from before, and it doesn't really matter anyway because he wasn't getting the usage here. A lot of people were excited with him after his performances in weeks 7 and 8. Not so much weeks 9 and 10, where he only had a combined 11 carries and 36 rushing yards. I am not touching Kenyon Drake. I don't wish him on my worst enemy in fantasy football right now. If you have him, I would not start him. I'm not getting him in my lineup. We need to see a little bit more production and consistency before I even think about Kenyon Drake, especially when they're going up against an improved Indianapolis Colts defense. They've only given up 1 rushing touchdown over their last 5 games. The reason that they're ranked 19th still is because the beginning of the season, that defense hadn't quite meshed and clicked yet, and a lot of these numbers are going to finally start catching up. They've only allowed over 100 yards rushing to opposing running backs twice all season long. Last week, the Tennessee Titans, 70 rushing yards. The week before that, Jacksonville, only 70 rushing yards. Definitely a solid run defense in Indianapolis. I don't trust Kenyon Drake at all. Frank Gore may see more volume, may see more carries, has still yet to have a touchdown on the year, and is not overly efficient. If you have no other choices and you're in 12-team leagues or deeper, Frank Gore could be a flex play just based off of volume alone in hopes that he falls into the end zone at some point. But if you have a better option, I'm not touching either of these guys this week. Different story on the opposite side of the football, though, for the Indianapolis Colts. Marlon Mack, who will be one of my starts of the week, somebody who I haven't liked the last 2 weeks. And over those 2 weeks, he's had 28 carries for a total of 90 rushing yards. Hasn't been overly productive. Did find that touchdown on a goal line carry last week, which kind of salvaged his fantasy day. Now things change this week. Really like Marlon Mack going up against the Miami Dolphins, who are on average giving up a total of 28 points per game to opposing running backs. They've given up touchdowns on the ground to opposing running backs every single game this year with the exception of 3 games. They're currently ranked 28th against opposing running backs. It's a great game to start your running backs against the Miami Dolphins. Looking for a huge bounce back week this week. Really like Marlon Mack in week 12. Steelers and Broncos are next, and for the Steelers, you got James Conner, who's almost a must-start every single week. You've been a little bit disappointed with his production the past 2 weeks, especially last week against Jacksonville. Only 9 carries for 25 yards, but that's going up against one of the toughest run defenses in all of football. He has had double-digit fantasy points every single week this season, with the exception of week 4 against Baltimore, who's the top-ranked run defense. Definitely somebody worth a start. He is going up against the Denver Broncos defense, which is improved against opposing running backs. They haven't given up a rushing touchdown to an opposing running back in their last 4 games. Not since week 6 in the Los Angeles Rams have they given up a rushing touchdown to an opposing running back. They are very much improved. They were very, very bad beginning of season. However, it's James Conner. He's going to see volume. Hopefully the scores can stay a little bit closer. They can continue to use him in the passing game and the running game. Still going to start James Conner on a weekly basis. For the Broncos, we got Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. Mostly just Phillip Lindsay is the only one that I would consider throwing in my lineup. Obviously, he's the number 12th ranked running back right now. Last week, another big game. Only 11 carries, but made it into 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's somebody who's going to have value. Also in the passing game, added another 4 receptions for 27 yards. Big fantasy day for Phillip Lindsay. But this is a tough matchup going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which only allows 19 points per game to opposing running backs. They have had 3 straight weeks giving up a rushing touchdown to an opposing running back, which is a plus. Phillip Lindsay has been running great. The only issue now is how many touchdowns and short yardage carries does Royce Freeman take away from him. Lindsay will still be productive, still a solid start, still a solid RB2 rest of season. He just kind of loses a little bit of that ceiling because of Royce Freeman. Royce Freeman is not somebody who I would look to start. He's somebody who will come in, get you a handful, 5 to 10 carries a game possibly, just to give Lindsay a breather. Lindsay is the number 1 running back in this offense, and he's the one that I would look for to starting every single week. Packers and Vikings now for the Packers. Aaron Jones, who's had 2 huge games. However, they were against the Seattle Seahawks and the Miami Dolphins. I don't want to read too much into Aaron Jones. I like the kid. I like the talent. He's the best running back on the roster. But don't let an easy matchup against the Miami Dolphins, where he went out for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns, make you think he's a solid RB1 rest of season. Last week against the Seattle Seahawks, had only 11 carries for 40 yards, did have a touchdown. What really saved his fantasy day was his receiving, which is definitely somewhere where we weren't expecting him to be at earlier in the year. Had 5 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown, but now he gets a really difficult matchup in the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, who have only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the year, basically shut down Tariq Cohen last week in the passing game. Jordan Howard couldn't get anything going. This is definitely a solid defense in Minnesota. Aaron Jones, I'm really tempering expectations on. This matchup really worries me. It's more of a rivalry matchup. I can see a lot more of Cousins and Rodgers going back and forth in the passing game with each other. Aaron Jones, I'm going to kind of limit expectations. Like I said, he worries me. He's still not somebody you really want to bench because his ceiling is so high. I just don't know if I'd go out there and expect the huge games that we've seen from him the past couple weeks. For the Vikings, we'll talk about Dalvin Cook, who was a huge letdown last week. But that was against the Chicago Bears. He had 9 carries for 12 yards, didn't do anything on the ground, but he played the most snaps he's ever played in his career, which is definitely good because it seems like he's healthy. And now he gets a better matchup this week against the Green Bay Packers, giving up on average 22 points a game. They've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns in their past 3 games. I expect a lot better day, a bounce-back style day from Dalvin Cook this week. I have no issues throwing him back into the lineup. You can look at the numbers from last week and be a little bit, discouraged by it, but I'm not giving up all hope. I think there are better games to come from Dalvin Cook this year. Most importantly, it looks like he's healthy again. Get him in a good matchup like this week. He could produce some solid numbers for you here in Week 12. Titans and Texans on Monday Night Football. And for the Titans, I want no part of Dion Lewis or Derrick Henry this week. Not only because of the matchup, the Titans are giving up 21 points per game to opposing running backs, and they have given up 4 touchdowns in their last 3 games. That's a positive. The problem is Tennessee may be without Marcus Mariota. If Blaine Gabbert's under center, the Texans are going to be able to focus a little bit more on the run game, take them away from it, and force Blaine Gabbert to try to beat them down the field. I don't like that matchup. I don't like the inconsistencies of these guys. Dion Lewis is total boom or bust, and Derrick Henry is 100% touchdown dependent. I don't want to touch either one of these guys if I have a choice on Monday Night Football. For the Texans side, we have Lamar Miller, who has had double-digit games 3 out of his last 4 weeks, which is a plus. But I don't like Lamar Miller this week. He's going to be one of my sits of the week, partly due to the matchup. They're going up against the Tennessee Titans, who are the 5th-ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up only 18 points per game. Up until last week, they were one of the top teams in football as far as giving up points to opponents. It's a solid defense, which Andrew Luck just carved up last week, but I'm not going to give up on this Tennessee defense. They are much improved this year, and this is a very tough matchup for Lamar Miller. Part of the reason I can't stand Lamar Miller is you don't know which Lamar Miller you're going to get. Are you going to get the Week 8 Lamar Miller, who went out there for 18 carries and 133 yards and a touchdown, or are you going to get the Week 9 Lamar Miller, who had 12 carries for 21 yards? It's just too much of a swing. There's too much inconsistencies. The floor is too low, and the ceiling is not overly high for Lamar Miller. I expect more passing through the air this week than I do on the ground in Houston, and I would sit Lamar Miller if I had him on my roster. All right, those are all the running back matchups here for the week of Thanksgiving, Week 12 fantasy football. Hopefully that was able to help you make some decisions on your lineups. Make sure you set them early. More games on Thursday than usual. Hopefully you all have a great Thanksgiving out there. I greatly appreciate the support, and I am very thankful for the community that we have out here. Just want to make sure you guys know that. Be looking out for the live show Saturday afternoon. right around 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Always fun, always a good time. Looking forward to it. You guys have a good Thanksgiving week, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.